In the heart of the White Wasteland, a monster lives. It's a place of frozen peaks and endless snow, where survival is a constant battle. There's a white serpent that can swallow glaciers whole, its scales shimmering like ice, and a gray bear whose every step causes the earth to tremble. Not to forget a vile rat that poisons the very seas. An emperor, barely alive after escaping the White Wasteland, told a different story. He had seen things beyond the monsters, things that truly terrified him. He warned that the most dangerous thing in that wasteland wasn't the monsters. The real threat lurked among the shadows, unseen and far more cunning. And so the journey continues into the White Wasteland, a place where monsters and something far worse lie in wait. Ashen jumped high in the air, aiming to crush the scorpion-like monster beneath him. The creature's massive claws snapped, trying to catch him, but he was already falling. A blinding flash of light exploded outwards. The sheer force of the impact shook the ground, sending tremors through the frozen wasteland. Ashen's hand clenched into a fist, ready for another strike. He felt the rough hide of the monster beneath his fingers, a grim satisfaction washing over him. Ashen roared, a primal scream of fury tearing from his throat. He was going to make sure this thing didn't get up again. Ashen's boots crunched in the snow, each step carrying the weight of his determination. He wasn't about to let up now. Ashen fell from the sky, driving his full weight down onto the monster. The wind howled around him as he crashed into the creature's back. The monster groaned under Ashen's massive size. Someone in the group muttered that only a barbarian would proudly wear their ignorance like that. One of them wondered how much longer they'd have to hang around these ignorant brutes. Another asked what ignorant meant, then quickly dismissed it. Ashen just kept chewing, oblivious to their comments. He didn't seem to care what they thought. Someone from the group snapped at Ashen, asking if he hadn't specifically been told not to eat that because it would kill him. Ashen just stared back blankly. Ashen stared down in disbelief. "It's been less than a week and you already ate it all?" he asked, but then quickly stammered, trying to take it back. The other person proudly declared that it had been a most noble challenge. Someone else nearby responded in disbelief, asking if they were actually saying that like it was something to be proud of. Suddenly, Greta screamed, her face contorted in pain. Greta collapsed to the ground. Someone shouted, asking what was wrong and telling her to get a hold of herself. They desperately tried to wake her up. "Wake up, Greta! Come on! Get up!" they yelled, shaking her. Ashen stood in the snow, looking up at the sky. He muttered that this wasn't what he wanted. The words swirled in the darkness, describing a world of fantasy, a world of wonder and magic. It was a world he had dreamed of for so long. He remembered quitting his job and setting off on a journey. He had climbed the tallest mountain on Earth and reached the very center of the planet, hoping for something to happen. He even made it to the southernmost point of the globe, searching for something more. But of course, nothing ever happened. Reality was the furthest thing from fantasy. Every night, he had prayed that when he woke up, he would be in the middle of a dream, and one day, that dream came true. The horse carriage trudged through the snow, each step echoing in the frozen air. One of the soldiers grumbled about the freezing cold, but the other soldier just told him to wrap up tighter or he'd freeze to death. Another soldier told the captain that crossing the White Wasteland was insane, even if the emperor was great. The captain snapped back, telling him to be quiet and reminding him that they had all agreed to this. But the soldier argued they didn't know it would be like this. Meanwhile, inside a warm building, a man in a suit still complained about the cold. He clicked his tongue, clearly annoyed. The man then turned to Milena and asked if she was all right, concerned about her in this cold weather. Milena replied that she was fine, but she complained about how cold it was and how rude everyone was being. She was clearly not happy about the situation. Milena told them not to be too harsh on the soldiers. She reminded everyone that they were the only ones willing to escort them across the White Wasteland. Milena asked if they shouldn't bring the soldiers inside, since they looked absolutely frozen out there. Meanwhile, the soldiers outside were shivering, clearly suffering in the harsh cold. The man with the monocle refused. He said they all knew what horrors dwelled in the White Wasteland, hinting at dangers unknown. Milena thought about the monsters, a worried look on her face. A long, long time ago, an emperor who wanted to claim the entire world set his sights on conquering the White Wasteland. He led countless warriors and soldiers, and even entered the wasteland himself, seeking to dominate the frozen lands. Years went by, and the empire fell apart. Then, just when everyone had forgotten, the emperor came back. He was making his way through the wasteland. He had lost all his men, and he was alone and broken. The emperor looked like he had aged decades in just a few years. He spoke like a madman, claiming there were monsters in the White Wasteland. But the worst thing wasn't the monsters at all. The emperor warned that the most dangerous thing in the White Wasteland was the barbarians. They were out there, somewhere. That's where the barbarians were, lurking in the shadows. They were right in the white wasteland. The man with the monocle didn't seem convinced. He said it was just a legend, surely nothing to worry about. But the Emperor's words still carried weight, you know? Lots of the monsters he talked about turned out to be real. And yet, nobody's ever seen a barbarian. Not once. That's true. She thought about it for a second, realizing how strange it was. Countless stories told, Yenone spoke of the barbarians. They were always out there in the legends. Suddenly, one of the men shouted for everyone to stop. He said there was something there. He could feel it. He squinted, trying to see through the snow. He said he couldn't see clearly, but something was out there. The man looked grim, his face tight with worry. He announced that he had both good news and bad news, but someone in the group cut him off, demanding that he just spit it out already. The man said the good news was that it was small, but the bad news. The lookout's voice echoed with a strange mix of fear and wonder. He said that whatever it was coming right toward them. The group tensed up, unsure of what to expect as the figure got closer. The group looked at each other in disbelief, seeing the approaching figure. One of them voiced what everyone was thinking, asking if it was a human. They had been expecting a monster, not a person. There he was, standing tall against the snowy landscape. It was Ashen, a barbarian from the white wasteland. He looked like he owned the place, completely unfazed by the harsh conditions. His eyes were intense, staring straight ahead. The muscles in his chest looked like they were made of stone. He was a mountain of a man, a true barbarian, and he was getting closer. The barbarian stood like a statue carved from the snow itself. His massive body was outlined against the blowing snow, looking like he was completely at home in the deadly wasteland. The group looked shocked, murmuring, "A barbarian?" At the same moment, Ashen stared back at them. Ashen casually explained that he had come out for a stroll because he was sick of looking at other barbarians. He added that finding outsiders in the snow was great luck. Ashen smiled, admitting that he didn't expect to run into anyone out there. He introduced himself as Ashen Barbarian Riedel, pleased to meet them. The merchant nervously confirmed that they were merchants, and the group were their hired guards. Ashen suggested that they should turn back, but he doubted they would. The guard's face showed he was getting nervous. He looked like he wasn't sure what to make of this situation. Ashen suddenly spoke up, realizing someone was inside the carriage. The guard tensed up, and from inside the carriage, Greta peeked out, listening carefully. Ashen smiled, casually offering to be hired. He seemed pretty confident about it. Ashen continued, asking if they didn't understand that he was offering to help them cross the wasteland. The guard behind him looked completely lost. The guard wondered if that was really all Ashen wanted. Ashen just smiled, saying if he was hostile, they'd all be dead already. The guard's face showed a mix of shock and confusion. He clearly wasn't expecting Ashen to be so persistent. The guard turned his head, looking for answers. He stammered, "Captain," inside the carriage, a hand clenched tightly, the knuckles turning white. Whoever was inside was definitely feeling the pressure. From inside the carriage, Greta and another person listened intently. "Did you hear that?" Greta whispered. The other person replied quietly, "Yes. What the hell is going on?" The guard turned back towards the carriage. "He says he wants to be hired as a mercenary," the guard explained to Greta. He then asked, "What do you want to do?" Ashen stared down at them, making it clear that fighting him wouldn't be a good idea. Down below, Greta listened carefully. Greta understood the message perfectly. She told the guard to tell Ashen that they accepted his offer. The guard nodded, relaying the message to Ashen. He just hoped they weren't making a big mistake. Ashen heard that she agreed. A smile crept across his face. Ashen said that was great news. The guards, on the other hand, didn't look so sure. The guard looked up at Ashen, stammering, "What the?" Ashen told him to relax, that he was just the hired help. He needed to speak with the one in charge face to face. Ashen's eyes narrowed as he warned that if the guard tried anything, he'd regret it. Another guard asked the captain if it was really okay to let Ashen meet her. He pointed out that the employer had already given her consent. The guard insisted that even so, they were mercenaries, and they should stop him somehow. He asked, "Stop that?" Ashen scoffed, looking back at the guard. He told them not to be ridiculous, acting like he was some kind of threat. The guard started yelling at Milena, telling her to stay calm. He was clearly shocked by what she was about to do. Milena asked if she could come in, her voice calm despite the tension. The guard, still flustered, agreed, but you could tell he didn't want to. Ashen grinned, his purple eyes gleaming with amusement. He was clearly enjoying the chaos he was causing. Ashen looked down at the guy, trying to keep the peace. He told him that he needed to calm down. Ashen tried to reason with the merchant, saying he didn't want to hurt him, but the merchant wasn't having it. He screamed at Ashen not to lie to him. Milena watched the commotion, a look of shock on her face. She realized she was standing right in front of a barbarian from the legends. Milena tried to defuse the situation, speaking calmly. She told Ashen it was a pleasure to meet him, hoping to calm the merchant down. Ashen looked around, commenting on how surprisingly warm it was inside. Milena explained that the warmth was maintained with magic. Ashen's eyes widened as he looked around. He was curious if it really was magic that kept the place so warm. He thought to himself that when it comes to this world, everything was new to him. Ashen gazed out at the snowstorm, his expression serious. He told them that the place was dangerous, and the chances of them getting through safely with those mercenaries were slim to none. That's why he was going to protect their lives. Milena's face fell slightly as she listened. Ashen was dead serious when he said there was one condition to his help. She started to wonder what he could possibly want. Milena looked at Ashen, her voice laced with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. She asked him what it was that he desired in exchange for his protection. She was ready to hear his request. Ashen smiled, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He told her he wanted knowledge of the world outside these snowfields. The information she possessed was what he desired the most. Milena listened carefully. Knowledge of the world outside the snowfields, she repeated to herself, trying to understand what he really wanted from her. Ashen smiled, thinking it was a fair deal. Milena, on the other hand, started to wonder if she even had a choice in the matter, given the situation. Milena looked down, a hint of resignation in her eyes. She told him that she understood, accepting the terms of their agreement. Ashen seemed pleased with her answer. He asked her what her name was. Milena looked up and introduced herself as Milena of House Akasha. Ashen smiled, revealing his teeth. He introduced himself as Kettle, saying that he looked forward to working with her from now on. He opened his eyes one day and found himself a barbarian in a snowfield. There wasn't any time to figure out why he was there or how it happened. All that existed in that place was a terrible, freezing cold and endlessly strong monsters. To survive, Ashen led the tribe in the snowfield, hunting and desperately holding on. Ashen didn't even know how much time had passed, but it had been countless years. He had strived relentlessly to escape that dreadful snowfield, but every time he tried to leave, the system blocked him with a grim notification. Quest incomplete. He could only leave the snowfield upon quest completion, it said. Ashen was about to give up on everything when he saw people occasionally visiting from the outside. He had no idea why they would willingly come to such a godforsaken place. But then he realized something. He realized that the world outside that godforsaken snowfield was the fantasy world he had always dreamed of. It was finally a fantasy world. From that moment on, Ashen began to move beyond just surviving, and he started acting with real purpose. He took on quest 295 to hunt the lizard within the time limit. He trampled monsters and completed the quests given to him one by one so he could finally leave the snowfield. Quest 295 was complete, and he was immediately given the next quest, all with a single-minded determination to get out of there one day. As long as he was stuck in that godforsaken snowfield, the information he could get was incredibly frustrating. He was mostly drawn to slicing their blades, or had gone half mad. He decided to have a long conversation this time. It had been too long since he had a real conversation. Being surrounded by nothing but stinky barbarians wasn't helping, and having a conversation with people like them was like poison entering his body. Ashen remarked that it seemed they were transporting weapons. Milena responded, asking how he knew. Ashen remarked that he could hear the sharp clang-lang of steel from the wagons. How could he not know? He then asked if there was a war going on in the outside world. Milena confirmed that the Empire and the Kingdom were currently at war. Ashen realized that the outside world wasn't exactly peaceful either. Milena continued, explaining that the massive Empire was pushing forward with overwhelming numbers and supplies. But, she added, the Kingdom wasn't easily pushed back because the Swordmaster and the hero were protecting the border. Ashen asked what kind of powers a hero and a Swordmaster wielded. He looked absolutely curious. Milena asked if Ashen was perhaps unfamiliar with mysteries, admitting she had never been outside of that place herself. She added that she didn't know the details herself. Milena explained that there was a power in the world known as mystery. She added that only a very small number of people could sense or use this power, and they were granted one of 5 ranks of strength. She started with the 3rd rate, explaining that it referred to those who could sense the power of mystery. Milena continued, moving on to the 2nd rate. She said that from the 2nd rate onwards, people could actually use the power of mystery. Next was the 1st rate, individuals who could manifest the power of mystery as mana or aura. She said that typically, knights, mages, and spirit summoners belonged to the 1st rate. Milena went on to say that beyond that, the ranks became meaningless as they were individuals who had surpassed human comprehension. Nevertheless, she continued, if she were to tell him the transcendent, she clarified that they were beings who could dominate and freely wield mystery, capable of splitting the heavens and the earth, adding that the Swordmaster belonged to this rank. Milena then got to the hero. She said that they were monsters who had gone beyond the domination of mystery to influence the world itself. A hero, she said, was, in and of itself a legendary existence. Malena concluded by explaining that the very act of having one's strength quantified and named was proof of that strength, and even a third rate was considered a powerful individual in a small domain. Malena suddenly said that she wanted to meet them. She then asked, excusing herself, if she was speaking to Sir Kettle. Catal looked away, lost in his own thoughts. He muttered that he couldn't even remember how long he'd been trapped in this place, that he had just been desperate to survive. Catal continued, saying all he knew was that this was snow, that there was nothing but a snowfield, a fantasy world, and that he couldn't escape. He admitted that he really wanted to get out of this snowfield. Catalantal's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening with resolve. He declared that he had to get out. Malena turned back to Catal and asked if he was a barbarian, wasn't he? She added that judging by his reactions, he seemed to be aware of her existence. Malena explained that she knew Catal because of a legend. Catal seemed surprised and asked if the legend was about him. Malena looked surprised that Catal didn't know. She asked if he really didn't know about it. Catal laughed. Realizing that the story involved an emperor, he thought that the guy was just a madman. Catal then asked Malena to repeat what she said. Catal said it was nothing and that the legend was probably correct, adding that beings like that had come before. He then asked why they were rushing through the snowfield with such a large quantity of weapons. Malena said that they needed a lot of money. Catal immediately pressed her, asking what they needed it for. Malena explained that her family had been in the commerce business for generations. They had become very rich, but because other people were jealous, they were now deep in debt. She added that this trip was to stop her family from falling apart. Ashen realized that a merchant's journey to settle a debt meant she must be planning to sell weapons to the kingdom. He pointed out that this meant there was a war with the empire. Malena confirmed it, clearly surprised by his deduction. Ashen explained that Malena had just said the empire was pushing forward with overwhelming numbers. If that was true, the empire wouldn't need more weapons. He continued, saying that if the empire didn't need them, then the kingdom must be the one in need. He added that when there's not enough of something that everyone wants, the price goes up, making the quest worth risking her life to cross the snowfield for. Ashen realized that since they were trying to cross the white snowfield, there must be no other way to get to the kingdom. He then asked if her territory's border happened to touch the empire's. Malena confirmed that he was right. Malena was thinking there was no way this was happening. She had heard that the barbarian of the empire was an ignorant savage. She wondered who he really was, and if he was really a barbarian. Suddenly, the merchant's wagon was attacked by something unseen. He shouted, wondering what the hell was going on. Ashen watched the attack, his expression unreadable. He said they had uninvited guests. Suddenly, a huge, black, slimy monster appeared, dripping goo everywhere. The group froze, unsure of what to do as the thing lumbered towards them. The captain gasped, clearly shocked by the sudden appearance of the creature. This is, he stammered, stepping back in fear. Miss looked at Ashen, her expression filled with worry. Black slime? She wondered. Ashen replied that it was a monster documented in the records. Miss explained that many powerful warriors had tried to conquer the white snowfield, but few returned alive. She mentioned that among the monsters they encountered, the black slime was the most frequently recorded, then asked if Ketal Nim also knew about it. Ashen casually responded that of course he knew about them. He added that they're chewy and surprisingly edible, making decent snacks. Miss was shocked, asking if he actually ate those things. Ashen replied that he was thinking about trying one, so he should go catch it. Miss stammered, clearly not expecting that. Suddenly, the slime was attacked with a burst of energy, getting blasted backwards. Miss looked on, completely surprised by the sudden turn of events. Ashen's face was calm, as he stated that he had made a contract with him. Ashen explained that he said he would protect their lives. He added that he had no intention of moving unless there was real danger. Ashen continued, asking what they meant, and that they could handle that much themselves. More importantly, he needed to assess the outside world's current level. The black slime let out a horrible screech that echoed through the snowfield. Below, one of the men looked up, startled by the sound. One of the men yelled for a shield. The other yelled in agreement, knowing they were in trouble. The shield slammed into the slime, barely managing to block the attack. The impact shook the ground. The slime slammed into one of the men, sending him flying backwards. He yelled in pain as he crashed into the snow. Another man charged forward, ready to attack the slime. He looked absolutely furious. The slime slammed right into the man, and he went flying. He screamed, feeling pain all over. The man yelled that black slimes only move in straight lines. He ordered everyone to scatter and coordinate their attacks. Two of the men shouted in agreement with the plan. They were ready to take on the slime. One of the men barely managed to dodge out of the way as the slime crashed down. He moved fast, but the slime was even faster. Another man jumped away from the slime, trying to get out of its path. He knew he had to move fast, or he was done for. The black slime roared as it came crashing down on the man. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through the snow. The slime's roar echoed through the snowfield like a predator's cry. It was a sound that promised nothing but pain and destruction. The man gripped his sword tightly, his knuckles white. He was ready to risk it all, to take down the monster. Suddenly, the system interrupted with a strange message. VortexScans.com. It was completely out of place. The man shouted for the others not to stop attacking. They had to keep the pressure on the slime if they wanted to survive. The man went flying as the black slime lunged at him. A beam of green light shot out, narrowly missing him as he crashed to the ground. The man yelled that simple attacks wouldn't work. He told them to aim for the core hidden inside the slime, hoping someone would listen. Blasts of energy tore through the air. The attacks were coming from everywhere, each one aimed at the black slime. The system flashed another warning, but the man ignored it. He raised his sword high above his head, putting all his strength into one final strike. The red core inside the slime shattered into pieces. It was over. With the core destroyed, the black slime began to dissolve. The remains of the monster oozed across the snow, leaving a trail of purple goo. The group cheered, relieved that the fight was finally over. One of them stammered, barely able to believe they had actually won. Suddenly, a shout broke through the celebration. The man yelled for everyone to stop, warning them that it was a monster. Another man yelled, telling everyone to aim for the neck. He swung his weapon with all his might, hoping to land a decisive blow. The monster slammed into the attacker, sending him flying. The force of the impact knocked the wind out of him as he crashed into the snow. One of the men chuckled, saying that the white snowfield wasn't as bad as they had heard. He wondered if the rumors were just made up. The captain frowned, warning the others not to relax just yet. He reminded them that they weren't even halfway through. Another man wondered aloud if the Barbarian was really that strong. He questioned if all the stories were just legends of the Emperor. One of the group scoffed, muttering that the Barbarian was at the bottom of the food chain in the white snowfield. He started to think that he was just leeching off them and suggested that they test his skills. The woman with blue hair looked thoughtful, as if she was worried about the other's plan. Her companion stared ahead, his face unreadable. One of the mercenaries spoke up, announcing that he had something to say to Miss. He looked serious, his gaze fixed on her. The mercenary continued, asking if she was serious about wanting to test someone. He reminded her that they were risking their lives to complete the mission, and as mercenaries, they had a contract with her, which was only fair. Miss responded, saying that she was grateful that they accepted the job. She added that it was a request to cross the white snowfield, and everyone else ran off just hearing the details. She admitted that if not for them, they wouldn't even have been able to try. The mercenary interrupted, stating that there was one thing he couldn't accept. He pointed out that the Barbarian hadn't fought even once, and that was a problem. The mercenary asked if he could test whether that Barbarian truly deserved such special treatment. He wanted to know if that kind of test was acceptable. The mercenary looked frustrated, explaining that he had tried to stop them, but they just wouldn't listen. He seemed annoyed that his concerns were being brushed aside. Ashen stared down at the mercenary and said that he wanted to test his skills. He added that he didn't mind, but it wasn't possible right now, which made the mercenary confused. Ashen looked up and mentioned that they've got guests ahead of them. He noticed the mercenary's confusion and started to question what nonsense he was talking about. A dark voice echoed, announcing that the frail mortals outside had arrived. The figures were shrouded in darkness, their red eyes glowing ominously. One of the newcomers grinned, declaring that he would enjoy a rare delicacy today. He looked eager, drawing his sword with a sinister smile. The monster's massive head filled the air, its jaws wide open, ready to strike. The attacker commanded the mortals to bark for him, his voice dripping with malice. The monster grinned wickedly, saliva dripping from its fangs. The attacker added that their struggles would only serve as seasoning for him, enjoying the thought of their pain. It covered her ears and screamed, overwhelmed by the snake barbarian's sudden appearance. The sound was so intense, it felt like her head was splitting open. Ashen swung his axe with incredible force, ready to strike down the newcomer. He looked absolutely furious. Suddenly, Lord Kettle interrupted, telling Ashen to stop. He declared that these people were his guests and ordered the snake barbarian to go back. The snake Barbarian glared down, asking why Lord Catal was here. He wanted to know if Lord Catal had forgotten the laws of the snowfields, warning that straying from their territory would have consequences. Lord Catal fired back that it was none of the snake barbarian's concern. He told him not to be ridiculous. The ground trembled as the snake barbarian announced himself. Energy crackled around him, making it clear he was not messing around. The snake barbarian hissed, asking how Lord Catal dared to order him around. He reminded Lord Catal that he was promised to be unchanged, and he sounded absolutely furious. Lord Catal clenched his fist, responding that the snake barbarian needed to be taught a lesson. He looked ready to fight. A massive wave of energy erupted as Lord Catal and the snake barbarian prepared to fight. The air crackled with power, and the ground shook. The snake barbarian coiled, ready to strike. His eyes narrowed, and he looked like he was about to unleash hell. A massive sphere of pure energy formed, crackling with destructive power. It looked like it could destroy anything in its path. The axe wielder charged forward with a desperate cry, swinging his weapon with all his might. He looked like he knew he was outmatched, but he wasn't giving up. The energy sphere exploded, sending shockwaves through the area and tearing up the ground. The force of the blast was incredible. Someone screamed, "My lady!" sounding absolutely terrified. The snake barbarian hissed that she was the type who only listened after a beating. He sounded like he was enjoying this way too much. The woman looked up at Lord Catal and told him she'd finish cleaning up and be there soon. She added that it wouldn't take long. Suddenly, a foot came down with incredible force, stomping the ground. A shockwave of energy spread out from the point of impact. The force of the stomp must have been huge because someone went flying backwards. They crashed down hard, completely off balance. Someone started charging up, gathering energy around themselves. The air crackled with power as they prepared to unleash an attack. The woman and Lord Catal both looked up, absolutely shocked. Something had clearly caught them completely off guard. Someone was begging for their life, claiming they had done something terrible. They were desperate for forgiveness. Ashen looked at the person and said it was only natural not to trust a stranger so easily. He understood their hesitation. Meanwhile, the carriage continued its journey through the endless snow. The horses trudged forward, pulling their passengers towards an unknown destination. Inside the carriage, the man with the monocle looked out the window with an Ashen, watched him quietly, waiting for whatever was coming next. Ashen turned to Melina and mentioned there was something he was curious about. Melina looked at him, a bit surprised, and asked what he meant. Lord Catal looked at the woman closely. Judging by her clothes and the way she spoke, she didn't seem like just a messenger for her family. He asked why she would risk her life on such a dangerous trade journey. The woman hesitated for a moment. Then she revealed that she was the first daughter of Lady Bilyaka, the concubine of Lord Kasak Akasha. Lord Catal asked if that meant a second wife, and she confirmed it. She continued, explaining that her mother had been brought into the family through a political marriage, only to be used and then abandoned. The woman said that her mother was a pitiful figure, unable to get any real power. The woman's voice trembled as she spoke about her mother and herself. She said that they were only family in name, and in reality, they were treated like servants. She looked down, regretting that she had revealed so much. She went on to explain that she had volunteered for this trade mission. Lord Catal seemed surprised and asked if she really did that. The woman confirmed it, even though she knew it was a dangerous journey that could cost her life. She explained that she volunteered because someone had to set an example. Lord Catal listened, then said that she was quite intelligent, which seemed to surprise her. Lord Catal added that she also had great ambition, calling her greedy. Then, out of nowhere, he shouted for someone named Lurch. The woman looked confused, probably wondering who that was. Someone announced that they had arrived. The woman's eyes widened a little, perhaps curious about what was waiting for them. They looked out, and one of them sounded shocked to see grass. It must have been a long time since they'd seen anything other than snow and ice. The landscape was a mix of green grass and snow-capped mountains in the distance. It was a stark change from the endless white they had been traveling through. She thanked Lord Catal, then wondered how he would manage the trip back. She pointed out that since he had let her take all the gold, crossing the border shouldn't be too hard for him. Lord Catal just looked at her. She then asked what Lord Catal meant when he had called her intelligent and ambitious. Lord Catal simply replied that he meant exactly what he said. She looked surprised. Lord Catal explained that her family used to be highly respected, but now they were on the verge of collapse because they were broke. He added that even though she was just the daughter of a concubine, if she made a move to save them, it would mean something. Lord Catal asked who she thought her people would trust and follow. He then asked if her goal was to take control of her family. She hesitated for a moment, then denied everything. Lord Catal smirked, realizing that he was right about her intentions. He said that the story of a concubine's kid taking on a dangerous challenge to get the family name was a tale as old as time. She thought that the barbarian was actually pretty smart, not like those fools who just act like they're clever. She was impressed. She continued, thinking about the power Lord Catal had used to beat the white snake without even getting scratched. She wondered what it would be like if she could control that power. She asked Lord Catal if he ever thought about leaving the snowfields. She asked if Lord Catal would like to join her. Lord Catal said that he would have to pass for now because he still had some things to take care of there. The woman seemed a little disappointed. She paused, then asked if Lord Catal would accept something from her. She held out a beautiful necklace. She asked that if Lord Catal ever decided to see the outside world and look for the Asha family, he would show them the necklace. Lord Catal said that if it was a gift, then he would gladly accept it. Lady Beliaka thanked Lord Kettle a lot. She said that someday she prayed that they would meet again. Indeed, she really meant it. With that, Ashen turned and started walking. The crunch of his boots on the snow was the only sound as he left the meeting place behind. Years later, in the white snowfields, it was finally time. All the conditions had been met at long last. The system chimed in, confirming that the 784th quest was complete. Reward distribution was finished, and all conditions were met. He was now free to leave the snowfields. Ashen smiled, thinking that he was finally going to the fantasy world he'd longed for. He could take his first step towards his dream. The fragrance of grass, the smell of a river, scents Ashen could never smell in the snowy plains. It was really nice. Very nice. Ashen looked up at the sky, a huge smile on his face. He was finally free. Ashen turned back and looked at the snowy mountain one last time. He shouted that he never wanted to meet that damn snowy plain again. This was it, a fantasy world. The one Ashen dreamed of even in his sleep. A world of illusions and the unknown he thought he could never reach. A world of wonder and mystery. Even though the starting point went horribly wrong, he survived somehow. Ashen decided that he was going to enjoy this world to the fullest. Magic and swords, dragons and elves, the fantasy itself. Ashen thought that without that desire, he would have died long ago. The snowy plain was a hell you couldn't survive with mere will to live. He noticed a place where miracles gather. Ashen smiled, thinking that must be a village. Finally, a civilized village in this world. Ashen remembered trying to talk to those ignorant barbarians who slept in dug-up snow about the need for shelter, but they just blinked, not understanding a thing. He deeply missed the systematically structured human villages. He wondered what he should say for the first greeting. Ashen wondered if he should go with hello, or traditionally ask, what world is this? Whatever it is, he decided he'd be gentlemanly. Ashen started walking towards the village, ready to greet the people living there. He was excited to finally meet people other than snow barbarians. Ashen raised his hand, announcing to the elf villagers that this would be their new home from now on. He was really excited to settle down in this fantasy world. Ashen told everyone to unpack their things, ready to start their new life. The elf villagers cheered, raising their hands in celebration. One of the elves asked the elder what was the matter, sounding worried. He wanted to know if this place was really safe. The elder assured him that it was. The elf pointed out that this was an extremely remote area, and humans couldn't come here. The elder agreed, but then he paused, hesitating to say more. The elf voiced his worry that the monsters from the plains might come. The elder agreed, saying that it was way too close for comfort. The elder assured everyone that there wasn't a problem. He explained that for thousands of years, nothing had ever lived outside the snowy plains. Plus, they had prepared a barrier, just in case. It was a barrier that used ancient magic for monsters. As long as that barrier existed, monsters could never approach them. The elder went on, saying that they also had Her Majesty the Queen. No matter what kind of monsters showed up, they would never be able to reach the Queen. Ashen paused, looking around. He felt like something tore. He wondered if he had touched something. Ashen turned and kept walking. He wondered how far he had to go. Ashen stopped, looking surprised. An elf? Ashen saw a real elf. He thought to himself that it was one of the most precious races of the fantasy world. He didn't expect to meet one so soon, and he felt good to be alive. But the little elf was scared. She didn't know where she was. She must have wandered too far, and she didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the elf looked up, eyes wide. Something had caught her attention. Ashen towered over the little elf, but he didn't want to scare her. He said, "Hello?" The little elf looked up at Ashen, and then she fainted. She just passed out right there. The wind rustled through the leaves, and birds flew overhead. It was a peaceful place, far from the frozen snowfields. I'm ignoring this panel. Ashen looked down at the unconscious little elf. He was surprised that she had fainted before he could even say anything. He figured he should probably take the child back to her village. Ashen thought that elves were supposed to be a gentle, orderly, and good race. He figured figured that if he returned the child, he might be welcomed as a kind person. He wondered what it would feel like to be welcomed by elves. Ashen smiled, thinking about it. He was actually looking forward to meeting the elves. The elf screamed, saying there was no way. Even more, a human. She seemed really worried about her child. She demanded to know what Ashen was and how he had broken the barrier. The elf continued, saying there was no way a human should even be able to get this close. She said there should have been a barrier. She was frantic, asking where Her Majesty the Queen was. The elf insisted she wasn't an enemy and told Ashen to release the child. The elf realized that her location had been exposed. She explained that the barrier was made with ancient elven magic, so no simple trick could let someone approach. She figured the fact that it was broken must mean humans came fully prepared, and she wondered how long they'd been tracking her. Ashen looked confused. He wondered if he looked like a kidnapper. He figured he needed to clear up this misunderstanding first. Ashen looked down at the child in his arms. He seemed concerned. Ashen told her to go on and return to her people. The elf took the child back, relieved. The elf looked up at the massive barbarian, still a little scared. Ashen towered over her, his shadow falling over the forest. Ashen wondered if his face was really that scary. He thought it was enough back in the snow plains to keep people away. He seemed a bit shocked. Anyway, Ashen told the elves that he had returned the child. He insisted that he wasn't their enemy. Suddenly, the elder shouted that the hostage had been released and ordered everyone to attack. Arrows flew towards Ashen. Arrows rained down from above. Ashen looked up, surprised by the sudden attack. He shouted, asking if they couldn't hear. Ashen thought that the elves were more savage than he had imagined. He recalled that the elves of legend were supposed to be gentle people who loved nature and sought peace. But this elf was violent and savage. Then again, they were a race that lived in the wild. It was only natural that they'd be ferocious, he thought. Nature was a world where only those far from graceful survived. It was only natural that they'd be ferocious, he supposed. So this was what it was really like, he realized. The elf shouted, wondering what kind of artifact Ashen was wrapped in. She ordered everyone to keep attacking, insisting that it had to have a limit. Suddenly, a powerful energy blast erupted. The force of it tore through the air, shaking the trees. Suddenly, there was a blast of raw energy. The ground shook and the air crackled with power. The elves tried to freeze the barrier, hoping to contain the blast, but the force was too much, and they were thrown back like rag dolls. The energy barrier kept expanding, consuming everything in its path. There was no stopping it. The elf elder stared, completely stunned. He stammered, wondering what he was even looking at. Ashen stood in the middle of the crater, looking at the panicked elves. He tried to tell them that he wasn't their enemy, hoping they would listen. Ashen put his hands together, looking a little embarrassed. He admitted that he might have failed to control his strength, and then he said the word elves, like he just remembered they were there. Suddenly, a sword made of fire appeared, cutting through the air with intense heat. The air shimmered around it. There was a massive explosion, sending pieces of earth flying everywhere. The elves in the area were caught in the blast, looking completely stunned. At that moment, a woman's legs appeared as she landed gracefully. Her sandals barely made a sound. The queen of the Leaf Clan arrived, her expression serious. One of the elves stammered, asking what was going on there. One of the elves shouted that a human had attacked them. The queen of the Leaf Clan seemed to understand, her eyes narrowing. Another elf, bow drawn, added that this place wasn't safe either. Ashen raised his hands, trying to show that he wasn't a threat. He told them to wait and listen to what he had to say. The old elf stammered, saying there was no way Ashen could be unharmed after taking a direct hit from their queen. The elf with the bow added that even a powerhouse like him was targeting them. The queen's eyes narrowed, a look of pure disgust on her face. Humans, she thought, were truly disgusting. The queen of the Leaf Clan drew her bow, her eyes burning with anger. She declared that she would make the human pay the price for their greed. Ashen was getting annoyed. He wondered if the queen of the Leaf Clan really couldn't understand him. They were speaking the same language, weren't they? Or was she just ignoring him? Maybe the relationship between humans and elves was just that bad. Ashen figured there was nothing he could do about it. He remembered something he learned back in the tundra. People would listen once you landed a hit. The queen of the Leaf Clan didn't waste any time. She fired an arrow straight at Ashen. Suddenly, a bright blue magic circle flared to life around Ashen. It looked like he was ready to defend himself. With a burst of speed, Ashen threw a punch. The force of the blow ripped through the air. Ashen's fist slammed into something with incredible force. A shockwave of blue light exploding outwards. The air cracked and shimmered with the impact. The queen of the Leaf Clan went flying backwards, a trail of displaced air marking her violent path. She screamed in shock and pain, completely caught off guard. Ashen looked down at his fist, a surprised expression spreading across his face. "Whoops," he mumbled, realizing he might have hit a little too hard. The forest floor erupted in a cloud of dirt, and splinters. Trees were uprooted and shattered, the landscape utterly devastated by the sheer force of Ashen's punch. The queen of the Leaf Clan lay sprawled on the ground, coughing weakly. Her clothes were torn, her face bruised, and her eyes filled with disbelief. Ashen stared at his hand, a thoughtful expression on his face. He wondered if he should have held back even more. The queen of the Leaf Clan looked up, her mind racing. She understood from that one clash that he was powerful, at least above the level of a transcendent. She wondered why someone that strong would be here. The queen of the Leaf Clan turned to her people and spoke with urgency. She told everyone to get away from here immediately. The elves reacted in a panic, their faces filled with fear. They stammered, acknowledging their queen's order. They would flee immediately. The villagers didn't wait a second longer. They turned and ran, scattering in every direction, desperate to escape the terrifying power. The queen of the Leaf Clan acknowledged Ashen's strength, but she warned that he would never accomplish his goal here. Ashen was just trying to talk, but he had a feeling this had gone completely sideways. The queen of the Leaf Clan began chanting, summoning something with primeval purity. She called out to one who sets the blackest dark ablaze, commanding it to come to her, the one with horns of pure flame. The air crackled with raw energy as the summoning reached its peak. The vortex of power swirled, ready to unleash whatever the queen had called for. With a surge of arcane force, Piego appeared, a bull wreathed in blazing fire. The creature's eyes glowed with intense heat, ready to obey the queen's command. Ashen stared at the summon with a strange look. The creatures in the tundra had been grotesque and bizarre, and a few looked like something out of a fantasy, but most of them were just hideous. But this creature before Ashen was something else entirely, a bull with horns of blazing fire. Ashen grinned, realizing this was a real fantasy world. The queen of the Leaf Clan glared, and she ordered Piego to destroy the enemy in front of it. Piego scoffed, thinking that contracts weren't worth the trouble. They were nothing but a pain. He demanded silence. The queen of the Leaf Clan explained that Piego embodied the pure flame. She added that the stronger a spirit was, the more ancient and proud it was. She said she couldn't even summon it with her own power, but she managed to secure a contract with the help of another tribe. She never thought she'd summon it under these circumstances, and she told Piego to fulfill the contract. Piego realized that the contract meant he just had to kill the human before him. He looked at Ashen with a strange expression. The man stared at Ashen, his eyes glowing with an eerie light, and asked if that thing was even human. He looked absolutely shocked. The air crackled with heat as Piego stood ready. The fire around it burned so bright it was hard to look directly at it. Ashen was amazed. He thought to himself that a summoned beast was something from a real fantasy. He realized that a human had intruded upon their lands. Piego scoffed, seeing Ashen as a pathetic human daring to covet the races of nature. Piego decided he would reduce Ashen to ash and leave nothing behind. Piego lowered its head and charged. The ground shook with each step, and the air grew hotter as it closed in on Ashen. Piego was about to hit Ashen. Ashen braced himself, but he didn't seem scared at all. The impact was a blinding flash of fire and rock. Everything was blown apart in a split second. Milena cried out as the shockwave hit her, throwing her back. The queen of the Leaf tribe stared, completely stunned by what she was seeing. Ashen grinned. He thought to himself that a beastly form put him at ease. Ashen didn't hesitate. He moved like lightning and punched Piego straight in the face. Marsilia looked up, her eyes wide with worry. She heard Ashen's words loud and clear. He was saying he would beat her to death. The punch landed with the force of a bomb. It was a blinding flash of light and heat, sending shockwaves everywhere. The explosion tore through the forest, leaving a trail of destruction. Trees were uprooted, and the ground was scorched. The explosion was so massive, it could be seen from high above the planet. It looked like the end of the world. Even after the initial blast, smaller explosions continued to erupt. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning wood. Marsilia screamed, feeling the full force of the blow. Ashen, meanwhile, was surrounded by a strange energy, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Marsilia landed hard on the ground, dazed and confused. She didn't understand what just happened, asking herself what this was. The surrounding area was completely destroyed, and Marsilia couldn't believe what she was seeing. It couldn't be real, she thought, as she looked around at the devastation. Ashen stood tall and unharmed amidst the destruction. Marsilia Marsilia looked up at him, fear and disbelief warring in her eyes. Marsilia begged him to spare her people. She pleaded for their lives, barely getting the words out. Ashen looked down at the elf and told her he wasn't her enemy. The elf looked up, completely shocked by what she was hearing. She could only ask what he meant. After a long talk, the elf finally understood that Ashen wasn't their enemy. She apologized, admitting they had judged him too quickly and had been fighting one of the good guys. She felt really bad about the mistake she made. Ashen smiled, saying it was fine. He understood they were driven there by humans. Still, he admitted, it was a little sad that they never gave him a chance to explain himself. The elf looked at Ashen, asking if he really wasn't one of the humans chasing them. She added that this was her first time even seeing an elf. Ashen mentioned that there weren't any elves in the White Wasteland to begin with. Marsilia's eyes widened as she heard Ashen's words. Ashen explained that the outsiders called him the Ashen Barbarian of the White Wasteland. Queen Marsilia was in utter disbelief. She couldn't believe that a human could even survive in such a place. She wondered if his arrival meant that others could come out of the wasteland as well. Ashen shrugged, saying who knows if others would come. He mentioned that there were spirits in the wasteland, so powerful that even strong beings couldn't beat them. He added that he was somehow able to deal with them in a quest, but that was a very forgotten story. Queen Marsilia sighed, saying that was a relief. Ashen tilted his head, asking if her summon was okay. He reminded her that he had split that bull in half. Queen Marsilia waved it off, explaining that spirits were beings of nature. She added that when forcibly unsummoned, they simply returned to the spirit realm. She realized she had been rude and asked if there was anything she could do for him. She offered to do whatever she could for Ashen. Ashen took a moment to think, then mumbled that there were spirits. He was clearly interested in learning more about them. Ashen wondered if beings other than elves could make contracts with spirits. Queen Marsilia frowned, thinking that might not be possible. Queen Marsilia explained that some humans, with a deep connection to nature, could sometimes form contracts. She sighed, concluding that it was impossible for him after all. Queen Marsilia pointed out that if Ashen truly wanted to contract a spirit, he should go to Elfo Sagrado. Ashen tilted his head, asking what that was. Queen Marsilia explained that Elfo Sagrado was where the god of the elves resided, the holy land of all elves. She added that it might be possible to form a contract there. Ashen pointed at himself with a grin, wondering if a human like him would even be allowed in a place like that. He was clearly curious about the possibility. Queen Marsilia explained that normally, no human would be allowed, but she added that with her introduction, it should be fine. She warned him to keep the location a secret. Queen Marsilia continued, explaining that the Holy Land of the Elves, Elfo Sagrado, was the dream destination of every elf researcher. But for humans, to even get close was incredibly dangerous. She added that no elf would ever reveal its location, because it was more precious than life itself. But still, Queen Marsilia held out a crystal in her open palm. It glowed with a soft light, as if waiting for something. Queen Marsilia admitted that she wanted to believe in Ashen. She really did. Queen Marsilia offered the crystal to Ashen, telling him to take it with him. She added that she would accept his gratitude later. It was a huge risk for her, but she seemed determined. Queen Marsilia said that even if he got close to their holy land, their god might test him, but she thought he'd pass. She wished him luck and thanked him for everything. Queen Marsilia then introduced herself formally, saying that she was Marsilia Hasiane Carusia, the queen of the leaf tribe that turns brown in autumn. She asked what his name was. Ashen grinned and introduced himself as Ketal the Barbarian. It was the first time he'd said it out loud, and it felt pretty good. Then, Ashen took a step forward. The ground cracked under his feet as he moved, leaving the forest behind. He was ready for whatever was next. Ashen jumped with incredible force, kicking up a cloud of dust and dirt. The trees below blurred as he shot into the sky, a gray streak against the blue. He flew through the air like a bullet, leaving a trail of disturbed air behind him. The forest floor became a green blur as he raced towards the horizon. At the border of the Varkan territory, in the kingdom of Gehent, a guard started yelling, asking what was happening. The other guards didn't know either, but something was definitely coming their way. The head guard of the Varkan territory shouted for the bell to be rung, and all guards armed. Something big was about to happen. Whatever it was coming fast, leaving a trail of dust and disturbed air. The trees swayed violently as it approached the kingdom walls. He landed with a heavy thud, kicking up a cloud of dust. Ashen stood tall, his muscles rippling as he surveyed the area. Ashen towered over the guards, his massive frame casting a long shadow. He asked if they were the guards guards of the territory and said it was nice to meet them. One of the guards looked absolutely shocked, remembering the loud thud from moments before. He realized that the ash-gray hair and the scar on the chest could only mean one thing. The guard realized that he was face to face with the Ashen Barbarian. He was in disbelief. The guards pointed their spears and swords at Ashen, their hands shaking. They warned him to stop right there, or they would attack. Ashen calmly asked them to chill out, saying he wasn't their enemy. He wanted to know what they were so afraid of. Ashen pointed forward, his massive hand moving with surprising grace. He seemed determined to get past them, no matter what. Ashen stood there, a slight smile on his face. He wasn't backing down, not even a little bit. The guards stared, completely confused. The wall, where had that come from? Ashen looked at the guards, his expression calm. He told them that he would like to visit their territory. The guards looked at each other, unsure how to respond. They had never seen anyone so casually ask to enter their territory, especially not someone as intimidating as Ashen. Ashen told the guards that he wanted to visit the territory, and if it was okay, he'd like to stay a while. He wasn't sure how long he'd be hanging around, though. The guard asked him to state his name. Ashen told him that it was Kettle. The guard then asked if he had someone who could vouch for him, or any form of ID. A woman thanked Kettle, then told him that if he went outside later and visited House Akasha, he could show them a piece. She held out a crest for him to take. Ashen looked at the crest in his hand. He asked if it wasn't enough to verify his identity, since he didn't have anything else. The guard explained that it was the crest of House Akasha. He added that Kettle must have received it from someone of that bloodline, and if it was the Akasha family, then they must be the remnant family from the Denian kingdom. The guard explained that the house had been showing up in the White Wasteland a few years ago. He asked if Kettle knew them, adding that the house's power had grown a lot since a new head took over. Kettle wondered if he could use this crest to prove who he was. The guard looked closely at the crest, saying it didn't seem fake, but he wasn't sure if he could confirm it. He then asked if it was from this kingdom, clarifying that they were in the kingdom of Gehentra. The guard told him that it couldn't be fully confirmed, but it was still helpful. He said that Kettle could enter, but there was a catch. Kettle looked surprised, wondering what the condition was. The guard explained that they needed to make sure Kettle wasn't a threat. They needed some kind of proof before they could let him in without any worries. Kettle thought about it for a second. Turns out, the condition was to form a party. He didn't seem too worried about it, though. The guard explained that there were 3 other people trying to get into the territory right now. The condition was to clear a dungeon nearby, with those whose identities were unclear. Kettle figured a party as a condition was easier than he expected. Kettle smiled, saying he accepted the condition. However, he was told there was one more condition. The guard explained that after clearing the dungeon, they had to report everything that happened inside. Kettle realized that those with unclear status were made to watch each other, and in the process, they identified anyone suspicious. He thought it was clever enough. The guard paused, saying it wasn't exactly like that. He then asked Kettle if he really was a barbarian. Kettle confirmed that he was a barbarian. The guard seemed surprised, saying he thought barbarians were more of a brute race, and that Kettle was the first barbarian like him that he'd met. The guard cleared his throat, saying they should end the talk there and get going. He seemed eager to get this over with. Alessandro Terrenis clicked his tongue, complaining about having to go into a dungeon with rats that go after people's pouches. He thought it was tragic. Kazan Hark scoffed, asking why Alessandro was picking a fight again, and if he was mad because a thief had scammed him and stolen his fortune. He was clearly trying to get under Alessandro's skin. Alessandro looked absolutely furious, saying how dare a petty thief insult a paladin. He then questioned if that was how paladins dress these days, adding that a real paladin wouldn't be there in the first place, just wandering around calling himself one. Alessandro Terranis glared at the other guy, saying that he was a bottom feeder just like him. He looked like he was about to explode. Alessandro Terranis asked what kind of dumb surname Tyrannus was, and said, "You." He looked absolutely furious. Kazan Hark smirked, asking if Alessandro Terranis wanted to go. He seemed to be enjoying pushing the other guy's buttons. Kazan Hark taunted him, asking if he thought that ragged armor would protect him. He was clearly trying to provoke a reaction. Suddenly, a voice broke through the tension, begging them to please stop. It was hard to tell who was speaking. Hayes sighed, hoping he'd finally gotten through to those two. He wondered if things would be okay now. Hayes mentioned that they needed at least 4 people to clear a dungeon. He added that one more person should be arriving soon. Hayes stared into space, lost in thought. He was probably wondering who their last party member would be. Anyway, back to the dungeon party. Hayes announced the last person had arrived. He hoped this one was actually sane, and told them to see for themselves. Footsteps echoed through the room as someone approached. Kettle turned to see who it was. Kettle found himself standing before a motley group of people. They looked up at him with a mix of curiosity and fear. One of the party members stammered, asking if Kettle was really one of them. Another gulped, feeling the sheer pressure of his presence. Kettle grinned, completely missing their reaction. He greeted them cheerfully, happy to finally meet his new teammates. Hayes told them to get to know each other while he was gone. He said he'd be back soon, then turned and walked away. So, Kettle decided to get the ball rolling and introduce himself. He announced that he was a barbarian, making sure to state his name clearly. One of the members, Kasan Hark, stammered as he introduced himself as a thief. Then Alessandro Tyrannus spoke up, declaring that he was a paladin, and asked if he used holy power. Alessandro explained that he was a rather special paladin, so he couldn't use any holy power. Kettle just nodded slowly, processing this information. Then Hayes introduced himself, stating that he served the god of lies and deceit and was a cleric of Colossia. Kettle seemed intrigued, saying it was nice to meet him. Hayes added that even as a cleric, his identity was uncertain, since the god he served wasn't exactly well regarded. Kettle simply replied, "I see," processing this information. The group stood together, ready to head out. Kettle towered over the others, his massive frame making the rest look like children. Alessandro Tyrannus spoke up, announcing that if everyone was ready, they should head out. He seemed eager to get going. The group started walking, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the halls. A strange feeling was in the air. A guard's voice boomed, declaring that they had arrived. The heavy metal door swung open, revealing a dark and ominous path. Kasan Hark let out a small noise, his eyes widening as he took in the sight before him. The air grew cold, and the scent of death filled his nostrils. The group stood at the entrance to the dungeon, ready to face whatever was inside. The air was thick with anticipation and a hint of danger. The dungeon entrance glowed with an eerie light. The system chimed in, warning them that the dungeon was filled with undead monsters and was on the second floor. Kettle didn't seem fazed at all, but the others looked a bit nervous. This was going to be interesting. The instructions were simple. Clear the dungeon and bring back proof. Kettle smirked, thinking a party as a condition was easier than he had expected. He was ready to get this done. He looked up, ready to get started. He asked for the plan, eager to hear how they were going to tackle this dungeon. Hayes spoke up, telling Kettle to drop the "sir" formality. He insisted that they were a team now and should treat each other as equals. Laughing nervously, Kettle paused, thinking about the dungeon and the best way to clear it. He seemed deep in thought, trying to figure out how to approach the situation. Hayes explained that Alessandro and the warrior would take the front lines while he checked for traps. Kettle would handle the strategies and test out his abilities from the rear. Everyone seemed to understand. Hayes grinned, declaring that it was time to move out. The team stood ready, the dungeon looming before them, full of unknown dangers. The team ventured deeper into the dungeon, the darkness swallowing them whole. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone and something else, something ancient and rotten. Hayes squinted into the darkness, muttering that it was so dark he couldn't see a thing. He added that not even the usual traps or tricks were visible, making it look suspiciously normal. Alessandro held up a hand, telling everyone to hold on. He admitted he didn't see anything, but he felt like something was off. Alessandro pointed to scattered bone fragments on the floor. He warned that they were skeletons, and if they got any closer, they'd rise and attack. Alessandro looked angry, realizing that the guard captain knew from the start. He concluded that the dungeon wasn't just for verifying their identities, but a tool to get rid of troublesome outsiders. Kettle looked surprised, repeating that they were up against skeletons. He wondered what kind of trouble they were about to get into. Kasan warned that skeletons were quite strong monsters. He explained that they keep moving even if they're wounded or have their limbs cut off. Kasan continued, pointing out that skeletons are made of bone, making them considerably tough. He realized that this dungeon's difficulty was higher than he'd thought, and told the woman to get her powers ready, the warrior to raise his shield, and Kettle to prepare himself. Kasan explained that he would aim for an opening during the fight. He added that a skeleton's body moves even when damaged, so they had to aim for the neck, its weak spot, and hit them multiple times. The others seemed impressed by his leadership. Kettle simply said, "All right." Nearby, a skeleton lay in pieces, seemingly defeated with ease. Kettle's eyes widened as he saw something coming. He could only manage to say, "Oh!" Suddenly, a skeleton lunged at them, its bony fingers outstretched. The thing moved fast, ready to strike. Before anyone could react, Kettle moved like lightning. He slammed his fist into the skeleton, the force of the blow sending cracks through its bones. Kettle stood there, his hand still raised. He looked almost bored, like he was swatting a fly rather than fighting a monster. Catal looked at his hand after the strike. He seemed to be testing his strength, not even breaking a sweat. Catal didn't hesitate. He brought his foot down hard, crushing the skeleton's head into dust. The rest of the group watched in stunned silence. Their faces were a mix of disbelief and terror, clearly not expecting that. Catal grinned, brushing off some of the bone dust. He said that Kassan was right and that once you take its head off, it really does stop moving. Kassan looked completely taken aback. That's not what he meant, he stammered. The system chimed in, explaining that skeletons are creatures made of bone. It said that even for a skilled swordsman, cutting through the bone in a single strike is nearly impossible without using aura. Kassan was still trying to process what he had just witnessed. He thought to himself that the skeleton was strengthened by the dungeon's mana, and that the only way to beat them was by repeatedly attacking its neck to sever the vertebrae. He continued, saying that to go beyond simply severing the neck and instead pulverizing the bone was impossible. But he knew from the moment he saw Catal that he was different, but he never imagined he was this strong. The rest of the group could only stare at Kettle, their faces a mix of awe and fear. One of them wondered out loud if he was even human. Catal grinned, eager to move forward. He said that they should keep going. One of the party members, clearly terrified, stammered, agreeing right away. He told Catal that there was no need to rush so much. Another party member, his face pale with fear, exclaimed that he didn't want to die. He was regretting his decision to join this dungeon raid. Catal stared down at the skeleton he had just destroyed, his expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. The skeleton's remains were scattered on the ground, proof of Ketal's overwhelming strength. The rest of the party could only stare at Ketal, their faces showing a mix of shock and disbelief. Catal looked back at them, wondering what was up. More skeletons lay scattered across the dungeon floor, their bones broken and scattered. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. The party members started to panic, their voices filled with terror. One of them stammered that more skeletons were coming. The cleric of the god of lies and deceit looked at Kettle with pleading eyes. He asked if he could ask a favor. Catal declared that he'd handle those skeletons all by himself, explaining he wanted to test something out. The cleric, clearly relieved, agreed immediately, and the others followed suit, not wanting to argue with the massive barbarian. Catal simply said thanks, his eyes glowing with a strange light. He was clearly excited to try something out. The party members watched him go, exchanging nervous glances. They wondered what Catal was planning to do. Catal got up close to the skeleton, looking it over with intense curiosity. He wondered how this thing was put together. With a swift move, Catal completely destroyed the skeleton. Bones scattered everywhere as he tested his strength. The skeleton was suddenly struck by a powerful blow. The sword pierced right through it, pinning it to the ground. The attacker looked down at Kettle with a smirk. He asked what Catal was going to do about it. Catal stood there, holding the sword steady. He was ready for whatever came next. Catal's eyes narrowed, a slight smile playing on his lips. He was clearly enjoying himself. Guess that's the end of this part. Catal asked what the skeleton thought about this. Suddenly, a glowing energy surrounded the sword he was holding, making it look even more deadly. Catal stared at the skeleton, ready to attack. The skeleton looked completely lost, question marks floating around its head. Up close, the skeleton's glowing eyes showed a hint of fear. It clearly didn't know what was coming next. Anyway, let's move on. Catal smirked, looking pretty happy with himself. He asked if the skeleton knew how to switch the sword to his other hand. The skeleton didn't wait for an answer. It lunged forward, sword raised to strike. You could see a blue glow around the skeleton as it moved, like it was full of some kind of dark energy. Catal didn't even flinch. He just grabbed the skeleton's sword with his bare hand. The force of the grab made a loud crack, like he was crushing the metal itself. He didn't waste any time. Catal followed up by punching the skeleton right in the chest. The skeleton went flying backwards, like it was hit by a truck. The skeleton's bones scattered everywhere as it crashed to the ground. It was completely destroyed, not moving at all. Even the skeleton's head was sent flying. It spun through the air before landing with a thud, the glowing blue eyes fading away. Kettle stood tall over the remains of the skeleton. The air crackled with the fading energy of the undead monster. Kettle held up the skeleton's head, a wide grin spreading across his face. He realized that it could even replace its lost parts, and its intelligence was pretty high for a monster. Meanwhile, Hayes watched with wide eyes, completely speechless. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Alessandro stared at Kettle with disbelief. He started to say something, but he was too shocked to get the words out. Catal stood there, the picture of raw, untamed power. It was clear to everyone that he was a true barbarian. The guy grinned, ready to attack. The other guy looked terrified, realizing he was in serious trouble. The skeleton's head floated in the air, still alive. The guy's eyes narrowed, understanding that this fight wasn't over yet. Catal stomped on the skeleton's head. He realized it could still move even without a body. The man apologized for being late. The other guy replied immediately, telling him to take all the time he needed. The guy tilted his head, saying thanks. He seemed a bit confused though. Kasan grinned, telling them that they should leave again. The others looked up at him, replying nervously, saying yes sir. He took a step forward, his heavy boots crunching on the stone floor. The sound echoed in the silence, a promise of what was to come. They all stopped as they reached the edge of the room. One of them spoke, saying this place. A voice echoed, telling them it was the second floor. The dark steps stretched upwards, promising more danger. The group stared ahead, their faces tense. Something had caught their attention, and it didn't look good. The man with the dark hair let out an adjusting his collar. He looked nervous, sweat beading on his forehead. Ashen suggested that maybe they should all take a break. He looked tired, and the dungeon was starting to get to everyone. Ashen agreed that resting would be for the best. The small man with the dark hair looked like he was about to have a panic attack. The rest of the group looked at Ashen, waiting to see what he would do next. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The woman spoke up, saying she had something to ask about the dungeon. She looked at Ashen, waiting for him to give her the go-ahead. Kasan said that he was embarrassed because his knowledge on the matter was not good enough, but he quickly added that a desire to learn was a virtue. The cleric looked grateful, happy to hear him say that. The cleric looked at Kasan with big, curious eyes. He asked Kasan what he was curious about. Kasan asked if this dungeon was close to the clan's pure territory. He wanted to know if there were any issues with the dungeon monsters attacking within the territory. The cleric explained that monsters from a dungeon generally do not venture outside, although he said there are exceptions, and those cases are identified and dealt with beforehand. Hayes cleared his throat, looking serious. He was about to say something. The cleric explained that dungeons are a natural phenomenon. He said that sometimes they appear as caves, and other times as towers. He added that the majority of dungeons show up near densely populated areas. The cleric continued, saying that's why the dungeon appeared here. He explained that when a dungeon shows up, the local lords check how dangerous it is. Then, they send mercenaries or guards to clear it out. The man with white hair asked if the dungeons show up inside the territory. The cleric replied that they do not. He clarified that they always appear at a certain distance. The man with white hair asked what the reward was for successfully conquering these dungeons. He seemed really interested in what he'd get. The cleric confirmed that there's usually a boss on the final floor. He explained that you get different rewards for beating it. He added that for a dungeon of this size, the rewards should be pretty substantial. Ashen stared down at the nun, a strange smile on his face. He thought to himself that this was just like a game, then realized he had said it out loud. Ashen turned his head, a curious look on his face. The nun seemed nervous, as she told him to go ahead and ask whatever was on his mind. Ashen asked who was making these dungeons, his voice serious. The nun looked completely taken aback by the question, her face showing total confusion. The nun replied that dungeons occur naturally, and that no one actually creates them. She seemed pretty sure of herself. Ashen argued that there were too many odd things about the dungeons for that to be the case. He pointed out the way they show up near populated areas, almost like they were demanding to be explored. He continued, saying they appear near settlements, tempting people with treasure. Ashen pointed out that for something supposedly natural, the dungeons felt way too planned. The nun seemed struck by what he said, stammering that he was right, wasn't he? The nun thought that it had been so obvious that she never even considered questioning it. She looked down, deep in thought. The man thought that it was true. He had never considered it. He had never even doubted it, because it was simply the natural order, a truth of their world. He wondered if this barbarian was questioning that very truth. The man thought that Befordans were nothing more than savage people, cruel, being devoid of all tears. He thought that much was true. But if everything goes as correct, he wondered if this man was the legendary barbarian, finding it interesting. Ashen looked at the group with a smile and asked if everyone had rested enough. He seemed ready to move on. The nun seemed to agree with Ashen, stammering nervously. The others looked at him, waiting to see what would happen next. Ashen smiled, seemingly eager to get going. He announced that they should leave again, sounding excited. Ashen took the lead, striding forward without hesitation. The others followed, their faces a mixture of apprehension and determination. They continued deeper into the dungeon. Suddenly, Ashen stopped dead in his tracks, staring ahead. He asked what the thing was, pointing at something. Ashen gestured towards the treasure chest, his expression unreadable. He told them that they could have it, provided they could unlock it. Kasan thought to himself that it was easy for Ashen to say, but to unlock a chest of that quality, they'd need a master rogue with proven lockpicking skills. But a rogue of that level would have no reason to be in a dungeon like this. He sighed, figuring they'd have to abandon the chest. Ashen then asked Kasan to unlock it. Kasan looked completely lost. He was thinking, what the hell? Ashen pointed out that there was a treasure chest, and Kasan was a rogue. He added that it was the role of a rogue to handle treasure chests, before asking if that was not true. Ashen seemed excited to see a rogue's robbery show. Kasan admitted that Ashen wasn't wrong, but there was one problem. If he could actually do that, he wouldn't be in this situation. Kasan was panicking inside. He thought that a bottom feeder like him, who wasn't even acknowledged by the guild, had no business knowing how to pick locks. But he couldn't just tell Ashen the truth. Kasan looked at Ashen's expectant face and thought that if he was honest, Ashen's excitement would probably turn to disappointment. He imagined Ashen saying that he called himself a rogue, yet he couldn't even do that, and that he was useless. Kasan was sweating bullets. He was scared of what would happen if he failed to open the treasure chest. He looked up, his face a mask of terror. Kasan cleared his throat, trying to sound confident. He said he'd give it a shot, even though he was terrified. Kasan stared at the lockpicking equipment. He thought they looked curious. He could feel Ashen staring right through him from behind. If he failed this, he wasn't getting out of here alive. Kasan was trying desperately to remember. He had to remember the skills he saw while working as their porter. The pressure was on, and he couldn't afford to fail. Kasan was deep in thought, remembering a moment where he had to risk his life. He knew he had to remember, or they were all screwed. Suddenly, the system flashed a message. Kasan the Rogue, Cry of the Soul. It was time to put